Hello, students. Welcome to the 51st session of the novel White Sargasso Sea. Here, we shall understand about the analysis of the novel. We come here to the third part. Now, we see that the first section, that throughout the novel, Rees prioritizes the narrative of voice of the outsider. It is therefore Rochester's voice that takes precedence over Antoinette's. When they are in the West Indies, as is more alien to not just the place but also to the culture, he is an estranged character in that world. When the action moves to England, Rochester disappears from the narrative, and Rees concentrates on Antoinette's experience. Rochester's disappearance from the narrative further suggests that he now hovers over the plot as the mastermind puppeteer, peering down into what Antoinette thinks as her cardboard prison. He seems to be spying on her, just as generations of Bronte's readers have done on the people of the Caribbean, as slave owners, as colonial masters, as feigned racial supremacists. This act of watching develops into a kind of pitiless voyeurism in which we, the readers, like Rochester, looking at the mad woman that he has managed to create. Imprisoned, Antoinette overhears the disembodied voices of Grace and Leah, just as she has earlier overheard the gossip of the Spanish Town ladies and the sexual play between Rochester and Amélie. Throughout her life, Antoinette gathers information. When she is nearly invisible, either unseen or unacknowledged, she remains on the outskirts of most interactions, never invited to tell her own version or share her own opinions. It is this silencing that Rees aims to redress with her novel by giving Antoinette her own narrative voice. Now just imagine if you and I were in the same position. How stifling it would be, where somebody else is speaking on your behalf. And what is the kind of speaking that they are indulging in? Mind you, it is not a fair speech. It is not a speech that represents you. It is a speech where they feel that what they have understood of you is to be true. Now, Rochester's estate in England recalls the estate of Colibri after the death of Mr. Cosway. At Rochester's house, which, although never explicitly named in the White Sargasso Sea, is known to the readers of the Jane Eyre as Thornfield Hall. The old servants have all been sent away, just as Colibri emptied after the death of Mr. Cosway. Suspicion pervades both estates. Just as Antoinette's mother, Annette, distrusted the black servants, so does Rochester distrust his own English ones. He offers money to Grace Poole in exchange for her silence and discretion. Transformed into a cynical realist, Rochester understands and accepts human greed, even though he previously condemned it in Daniel Cosway. He in turn turns out to be the replica of the person whom he detested. He knows his command over his servants is tenuous, as was the Cosways at Colibri. Authority cannot be assumed, but must be bought. In one passage, Rhys allows us to hear Grace's private thoughts, revealing a similarity between Grace and Antoinette. Grace, like Antoinette in her time at the convent, fears the world outside of Thornfield Hall. Feeling safe behind its thick wall stones, in showing Grace's vulnerability, Rhys gives her a reason for playing such a detestable part in Antoinette's cruel captivity. While Rhys never condones Grace's immoral actions, she does explain them, leading a fairness to her rewriting of Bronte's texts. Antoinette's narrative in Part 3 works to humanize our conception of the Creole mad woman, as shaped by Bronte's novel. Given the emptiness of Antoinette's days and her isolation from the outside world, she necessarily loses track of time and place. Otherwise, Antoinette seems to be lucid as she questions the responses for her captivity and abuse. We feel first-hand the horror of her entrapment, which calls to mind the slavery in her native land. If the slaves of her native land were physically entrapped, here we see she being entrapped both physically and mentally. The ocean voyage from the Caribbean to England, while reversing the direction of the transatlantic slave routes, recalls such images of terror, confusion, and discomfort. Interestingly, the barbarity of Antoinette's enslavement takes place on the western island that Rochester believes to be the seat of civilized logic and reason. Rhys has adapted the scene in section 2 of Richard Mason's Visit from Jane Eyre, but has altered the perspective. No longer is the scene from the viewpoint of Jane, the young English girl to whom the captive mad woman in the attic is a frightening monster. Instead, Rhys allows Antoinette to speak. Antoinette reveals just how confused and dislocated she feels. That she does not remember attacking Richard Mason suggests the extent of her fragmentation. It seems that she and the raving madwoman are two distinct entities locked in combat over the woman's identity. What troubles Antoinette most about Richard Mason's visit is that he does not recognize her. Without a mirror in the attic, Antoinette can no longer view her reflection and confirm her own identity. She has slowly become Rochester's creation named Bertha Mason and transformed into a mad woman. Richard's non-recognition of Antoinette recalls Antoinette's own non-recognition of her mother when she visited her mother at the house of the caretakers. Richard's look of horror confirms that Antoinette has followed in her mother's footsteps, of not just being deranged socially, but psychologically too. Antoinette's attachment to her red dress is particularly poignant. She clings to the dress as a reminder of her past, believing she can smell the Caribbean landscape in its folds. It is by touching and staring at the dress that she loses herself into her sensory, organic world of memories. Significantly, the dress is red, the color which acts as not just a motif throughout the novel, but it also is a color that symbolizes the passion, the destruction that led to her current captivity, which the reader and the listener shall see that it is the same color which is bound to her doom. For Antoinette, Money and time have no meaning. Never concerned or interested in money, Antoinette has lost of her own wealth everything that she ever had. Ever since assumed Rochester of the financial control, she has neither power of her body, nor has she got power over the finances, nor has she got any power over her own thoughts. Rather than buy the knife, Antoinette barters for it with her locket, reverting to a more primitive system of exchange. Like money, time has no relevance for Antoinette. She says that it is not something which matters to her. Both time and money are constructs that have little bearing on her world of images. Ah, or on the Caribbean sights and sounds for which she longs. In forestalling Antoinette's fatal jump foretold by Bronte's novel, Rees grants her protagonist a final movement of triumph. Antoinette appears active and defiant. About to enact her dream, she is finally allowed to speak, and Rochester must listen. The fire is her voice of rage. The novel suggests that Antoinette's paranoia about being followed and watched is legitimate. The reader of Jane Eyre becomes complicit in the watching. Antoinette feels these eyes upon her, viewing her as a ferocious lunatic. Even Antoinette watches herself in horror as she dreams that she looks at herself in the mirror and sees not but herself but a ghost. Rees thus constructs a world of scrutiny as we spy Antoinette from all the angles, from Grace Poole's point of view, from Rochester's, from her own, and also from her own readers of Jane Eyre. Like a mirror reflected an infinite number of times, Rees's narrative web continues to grow outward, incorporating a multiplicity of voices and competing perspectives. She thus confirms Antoinette's anxiety that eyes are always upon her. Thank you.